Don't breathe. If they hear you, you'll die." Marcus Hale froze as a strong hand yanked him into the darkness of a closet, the scent of lavender soap and panic filling his lungs. The hand belonged to Aisha, his black housekeeper, steady-eyed, trembling only at the edges, pressing a finger to her lips as footsteps passed just outside the door. Through a narrow crack, Marcus watched his world split open. His wife, Veronica, laughed softly with his younger brother, Ryan, their voices dripping with intimacy and something colder. Ryan muttered that Marcus was still standing, and Veronica replied with irritation she'd already doubled the dose in his morning green juice. But what Marcus heard next would change everything forever. In that instant, every dizzy spell, every wave of weakness Marcus had shrugged off snapped into focus. It wasn't stress. It was poison, served with a smile at his own table. Aisha didn't wait for him to process the betrayal. She dragged him out the back and into her battered old sedan, refusing his instinct to call the police. "Your captain friend," she hissed, "he's bought. Calling him is signing your death warrant." She stripped Marcus of anything traceable, his phone, his expensive watch, and tossed them into a scrapyard bin like dead weight. Hidden in Aisha's small, spotless home in a rough neighborhood, Marcus burned with fever while she fought suspicion from nosy neighbors and kept him alive with quiet grit. And when the conspirators finally cornered them at a public event, Marcus stepped forward, not as a billionaire, but as a man awakened, ready to expose the truth and protect the only person who had truly saved him. Marcus lay on Aisha's narrow couch, sweat soaking the collar of his designer shirt until it felt like a costume melting off his skin. Every time his eyes fluttered shut, the voices came back clearer than the fever. "He's still breathing." Ryan's low chuckle. "Then I'll make sure he won't be by tonight." Veronica's impatient sigh, as if she were discussing spoiled groceries, not her husband's life. And then the line that kept stabbing Marcus awake. "I doubled the dose in his green juice." He had built an empire on numbers, on contracts, on people smiling while they wanted something. But nothing in boardrooms had prepared him for the cruelty of familiarity, for the way betrayal wore his brother's face and his wife's perfume. The dizziness he'd dismissed as stress, the trembling hands he'd blamed on exhaustion, it had all been a slow, deliberate countdown. Aisha pressed a cool cloth to his forehead and murmured, "Stay with me, Marcus. Don't let them win." Her voice didn't carry pity. It carried resolve, like someone who'd learned long ago that survival isn't gifted. It's fought for. Marcus tried to speak, but his throat burned. All he could manage was a rasped whisper. "Why? Why help me?" Aisha's hand didn't falter. "Because I saw the truth," she said, eyes shining in the dim light. "And because nobody deserves to die in their own home while monsters call it love." Outside, a neighbor's laughter drifted through the thin walls. Ordinary life dangerously close. Inside, Marcus swallowed the terror that his world could still reach him. He wasn't just recovering from poison. He was waking up to a new reality. The only person standing between him and the grave was the woman he'd barely noticed until she became his reason to keep breathing. By the third day, the fever eased, but the terror sharpened. Marcus sat upright, fingers trembling around a chipped mug of water. And for the first time, he wasn't fighting sleep. He was fighting memory. The past few weeks replayed like a film he'd refused to watch. The random nausea after breakfast, the sudden vertigo in meetings, the way his vision blurred while Veronica's voice stayed sweet and concerned. "You're working too hard, baby." He'd believed her because it was easier than admitting the impossible. Now every symptom lined up with cruel precision. Not burnout, not stress, a slow, rehearsed execution. His stomach twisted as he remembered the morning's Veronica, placing the green juice in his hand like a ritual, kissing his cheek as if she were blessing him. How many times had he thanked her? How many times had he smiled unaware? He was drinking his own funeral. Aisha watched him from the doorway, silent but present, as if her steadiness could keep him from shattering. "I let them get close," Marcus whispered, voice breaking on the truth. "I built my life around people who were waiting to bury me." Aisha stepped forward and set her palm against his shoulder, firm, anchoring. "You didn't let anything," she said. "You trusted. That's not a crime. But staying blind now would be." Marcus swallowed hard, his eyes burning, not from fever anymore, but from grief that felt like betrayal's aftertaste. He looked at Aisha, really looked, and something inside him shifted from shock to purpose. "Then I'm done being the man who doesn't see," he said, standing on unsteady legs. "If they wanted me weak, they chose the wrong ending." And in the quiet of that small room, Marcus understood surviving the poison was only the beginning. The real fight was reclaiming his life from the people who tried to steal it with a smile. Marcus didn't wait for daylight. The moment his legs stopped wobbling, Aisha shoved a faded baseball cap into his hands and pulled him toward the door like the walls themselves had ears. Outside, the air tasted of smoke and rain, and every passing engine sounded like a threat. They slid into her battered old sedan, the kind with cracked vinyl seats and a stubborn ignition. Yet it felt safer than any luxury car Marcus had ever owned. As Aisha drove, her knuckles stayed white on the wheel, eyes flicking to the rearview mirror, as if expecting headlights to bloom behind them. Marcus' instincts screamed for order, for authority, for the comfort of a badge. His hand drifted to his pocket, empty. He swallowed, then reached for Aisha's spare phone and dialed the only number that still felt like a lifeline. "Captain Reed." He breathed when the line connected, voice raw. "It's Marcus. I need." Aisha snatched the phone so fast his words collapsed in his throat. "No," she said, cutting him off with a glare that could stop a storm. "Not him." Marcus stared, stunned. "Reed is my friend. He'll protect us." Aisha's laugh was short, bitter, more pain than sound. "Your friend eats from your brother's hand," she said, each word a hammer. "Calling him isn't help. It's an invitation. It tells them exactly where you are." The call ended with a sharp tap. Silence rushed in, heavy and suffocating. Marcus looked out at the blurred streets, realizing the terrifying truth. The world he trusted, police, power, connections, might already belong to Ryan and Veronica. And in that fragile, flickering moment, the only person he could rely on was Aisha, driving him forward with nothing but grit, fear, and a refusal to let him die. The moment Aisha killed the call, Marcus felt something inside him snap, like the last thread of safety he'd been clinging to finally gave way. "You don't understand," he protested, voice tight with panic. "Reed has pulled me out of trouble before. He's loyal." Aisha's eyes didn't soften. If anything, they hardened with a kind of exhausted truth. "Loyal to whoever pays," she said. "Your brother didn't just poison you, Marcus. He bought the exits too." Her words landed like a cold hand around his throat. Marcus stared at the dark screen, suddenly imagining the other end of the line. Not help, but a location pin sliding straight into Ryan's pocket. The realization was humiliating, how easily his power could be turned against him. How quickly the world he controlled could become a cage. "Give me your watch," Aisha ordered. "What?" "No, this is..." He hesitated, fingers brushing the heavy metal at his wrist. The symbol of wealth, certainty. Aisha didn't argue. She simply waited, unblinking, and Marcus, trembling, unclasped it like he was removing a shackle. She took it, then held out her hand again. "Phone." He handed it over, and the car filled with the ugly silence of surrender. Aisha drove them to a scrapyard where rusted metal slept in heaps like dead giants. Without ceremony, she opened the window and hurled the phone and the watch into the shadows. They vanished with a dull clatter. Final, irreversible. Marcus flinched, grief and relief twisting together. For the first time, he understood survival wasn't about what he owned. It was about what he was willing to lose fast enough to stay alive. The clatter from the scrapyard bin echoed in Marcus' chest long after the watch and phone disappeared. It wasn't just electronics and steel. Those were the last fingerprints of the life he'd trusted. Aisha kept driving, not looking back, as if staring too long would invite fate to follow. "You just erased yourself," Marcus murmured, voice hollow. Aisha finally exhaled, a breath she'd been holding for miles. "No," she corrected, eyes locked on the road. "I erased their map." Her tone softened just a fraction. "That phone pings towers. That watch can be tracked. If Ryan paid Captain Reed, then they don't need to guess. They just follow the dot until it stops." She tapped the steering wheel, thinking 3 moves ahead. "Now the dot stops in a scrapyard. They'll think you were mugged, maybe killed, maybe dumped." Marcus' stomach turned. The idea of his brother imagining his corpse felt both sickening and terrifyingly useful. "So we're a rumor now?" he whispered. Aisha nodded. "A ghost. And ghosts don't get hunted as easily." They turned onto a quieter street, passing neon-lit storefronts and faces that never looked twice. Aisha reached into the back seat and tossed him a faded hoodie. "Change. Hide your hair. Keep your head down. You don't look like you belong here, and that alone can get you noticed." Marcus pulled the hoodie on, the fabric rough against his skin. In the side mirror, he barely recognized himself. Not a billionaire, not a headline, just a man with fear in his eyes and no proof of who he used to be. And yet, as Aisha drove them deeper into the city's shadows, something unexpected rose beneath the panic: gratitude, sharp and aching. Because the truth was simple. Aisha hadn't thrown away his life. She'd thrown away the leash. Aisha's neighborhood didn't welcome strangers. It swallowed them. The streetlights flickered like tired eyes, and the air carried the mixed smell of frying oil, wet concrete, and lived-in struggle. Marcus kept his head down beneath the faded hoodie, feeling every glance like a blade, until Aisha guided him through a narrow alley and into a small house that looked fragile from the outside but impossibly neat within, like someone had fought hard to keep chaos from crossing the doorstep. "Sit," she said, locking the door with 2 sharp clicks. The moment Marcus lowered himself onto the couch, his body betrayed him. The fever surged back, hot and relentless, turning the room into a blur of shadows and sound. He tried to apologize, tried to stand, but his knees buckled. Aisha caught him before he hit the floor, her strength startling in its quiet certainty. "Easy," she murmured, pressing him down. "You're safe here." Safe. The word felt unreal. In his mansion, surrounded by guards and marble, he'd been drinking death from a crystal glass. Here, with peeling paint and a single fan rattling in the corner, he was finally out of reach. Aisha moved with purpose, boiling water, folding a worn blanket, wiping his forehead with a cool cloth the way a mother might. When he drifted into delirium, he heard her voice cutting through the dark. "Stay with me, Marcus. Don't give them your ending." At some point, he started shaking. Not just from fever, but from the shame of realizing how invisible she'd been in his old life. His lips trembled as he whispered, "Why are you doing this?" Aisha didn't hesitate. "Because someone has to," she said softly. "And because you deserve to live long enough to tell the truth." That night, the walls of Aisha's home felt thinner, not from poor construction, but from the way danger pressed in from the outside. Marcus was finally breathing without choking on fever, yet every small sound still made his pulse jump. A dog barking 2 streets away, a motorcycle backfiring, the distant slam of a car door. Then it started, the slow poison of suspicion. From the front window, Marcus saw Mrs. Cora, Aisha's neighbor, standing with her arms folded like a checkpoint. She glanced at Aisha's driveway again and again, eyes narrowing at the unfamiliar car that hadn't moved in days. The next morning, she lingered longer, pretending to sweep her porch while watching the house with the patience of someone who collected secrets like coins. Aisha noticed too. Marcus saw it in the way she spoke less, listened more, and kept her steps quiet on the creaking floorboards. "She's not a bad woman," Aisha whispered, fastening the curtains until not even a sliver of light escaped. "But curiosity can be deadly when the wrong people are looking." Marcus' throat tightened. He hated that his survival was turning Aisha's life into a risk she never asked for. "I should go," he said, the words tasting like guilt. Aisha shook her head once. "Not yet. You're not strong enough. And if you step outside, you don't just endanger you, you endanger everyone who sees you." A knock sounded somewhere down the street. Maybe not even their door yet. Marcus flinched hard. Aisha lifted a finger, commanding silence. Her eyes sharp and dark with fear she refused to name. In that stillness, Marcus understood. Hiding wasn't passive. It was a war fought in whispers, where one wrong glance could turn a neighbor's suspicion into a death sentence. The first time Marcus stepped back into the world, it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like walking into a spotlight with a target on his chest. Aisha insisted on it anyway, pulling his hood low, fixing his collar, whispering, "Eyes down. Breathe. Stay close." The public event was loud and glittering. Music, cameras, perfume, laughter, everything Marcus once ruled, now twisted into a threat. He moved through the crowd like a stranger haunting his own life, his pulse sinking with every flash of a phone camera. Then he saw Ryan. Ryan's smile was polished, casual, the kind that belonged on magazine covers, until his gaze landed on Aisha. It changed instantly, sharpening into something predatory. He pushed through the guests with purpose, catching Aisha near a corridor where the noise thinned. "So you're the problem?" he muttered, grabbing her wrist hard enough to make her wince. "You really thought you could steal what's mine?" Aisha tried to yank free, but Ryan tightened his grip, leaning in with a hissed threat meant only for her. And in that second, Marcus felt the old fear try to paralyze him. Fear of power, of consequences, of what happens when you challenge monsters in public. But the fever had burned something clean inside him. "Let her go." Marcus' voice cut through the corridor like a blade. Ryan turned, and the color drained from his face. "You?" Marcus didn't give him time to recover. He stepped forward and drove his fist into Ryan's jaw. A raw, unmistakable crack that stopped the world for a heartbeat. Ryan stumbled, hit the floor, and the corridor erupted. Shouts, footsteps, startled gasps. Marcus stood over him, shaking, not with weakness this time, but with fury and clarity, as Aisha's hand found his sleeve, steadying him, while the truth began to surface in front of everyone who had been fooled. For a heartbeat, the corridor held its breath. Ryan on the floor, Marcus standing over him, Aisha's fingers gripping his sleeve like an anchor. Then the world exploded. Phones rose. Someone screamed. A security guard rushed in, too late to undo what had already been seen. Ryan clutched his jaw, trying to twist pain into performance. "He assaulted me," he barked, eyes wild, scanning for allies, until the first sirens cut through the music like a warning bell. The doors swung open, and federal agents poured in with clipped voices and hard steps, followed by reporters who smelled scandal the way sharks smell blood. Flashbulbs burst. Microphones shoved forward. Marcus watched the crowd split like water. And then Veronica appeared. Perfect hair, perfect dress, a perfect smile cracking at the edges when she spotted Marcus alive. "This is a misunderstanding," she said quickly, reaching for his arm as if tenderness could rewrite the last few days. "Marcus, darling, you're confused." An agent stepped between them and held up a warrant. "Veronica Hale, you are under arrest. Conspiracy, attempted homicide." The color drained from her face so fast it looked like the room had stolen it. Ryan tried to stand, rage replacing shock. "You can't. This is..." Another agent snapped cuffs on him before he finished the lie. Behind them, the estate manager, Marina, hands shaking, broke under the pressure and blurted, "She told me to bring the supplements. She said it was just to help him sleep. She told me not to ask questions." Veronica's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Cameras devoured her silence. Marcus felt Aisha's hand slide into his, steady, real, while the empire of deception finally collapsed in full view of the world. Silence fell in waves after the cuffs clicked shut. First, the stunned hush of disbelief, then the low, restless murmur of a crowd realizing they had been watching a lie for years. Marcus didn't chase the cameras. He didn't rush to explain himself to the reporters calling his name like it was a brand. He turned instead toward the one person who had never needed his status to see his humanity. Aisha stood slightly behind him, shoulders squared, eyes lifted but cautious, like someone who had spent a lifetime learning that attention can cut as sharply as hatred. Marcus felt the weight of everything he hadn't seen before. How she had moved through his house like a shadow. How easily people dismissed the hands that cleaned their messes and saved their lives. He stepped forward, facing the microphones, the flashing lights, the hungry faces. "I thought power could protect me," he said, voice shaking once, then steadying. "I thought blood meant loyalty. I thought money could buy safety." His gaze flicked to Veronica and Ryan being led away, their perfect world crumbling with every step. "I was wrong." A ripple ran through the crowd. Marcus turned, reached for Aisha's hand, and held it where everyone could see. Not as a spectacle, but as a truth. This woman risked everything when she could have walked away. She didn't do it for a reward. She did it because she has something rarer than wealth. She has honor. Aisha's eyes glistened, and for a second, she looked like she might pull back out of habit. Marcus only squeezed her fingers tighter. "When this is over," he said softly, more to her than to them, "will you have dinner with me? Not as my employee, as my equal." And in the wreckage of betrayal, something quietly beautiful began. A new life built on the one thing Marcus had almost died without: real loyalty. The engines outside purred like distant thunder. A row of supercars waiting to carry Marcus back into the life that almost killed him. Cameras still hovered, hungry for a final image. Rich man redeemed, villain punished, story neatly wrapped. But Marcus didn't walk toward the velvet rope. He walked toward Aisha. "Come with me," he said, not as an order, but as an offering. Aisha glanced at the flashing lights, then at the crowd that had once overlooked her like furniture. For a moment, she looked tired in a way money could never understand. Then she nodded once. They slipped away from the glittering chaos, past the Ferrari and the Porsche, past the symbols of a world built on appearances, and climbed into Aisha's old sedan. The paint faded, the seats worn, the engine coughing like it had lived a hard life and refused to quit. As the car rolled forward, Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. He wasn't escaping anymore. He was choosing. The city lights blurred on the windshield, and in that humble car, he finally understood what real wealth felt like: a second chance earned by truth and given by a woman with nothing to gain. The people who love you loud aren't always the ones who love you real. Sometimes the truest loyalty comes from the person you barely noticed until they're the reason you're still alive. Measure your life not by what you own, but by who stands beside you when everything collapses. If this story hit you, comment below. Who would you trust when the mask comes off? And don't forget to subscribe to StorySphere, because the next story might be the one that changes how you see the people around you.